Hello, everyone that's joining us live. Welcome to this webinar on how to sell the value of SEO to your leadership team. My name is Dave Brown. I've worked at Deep Crawl for around about 5 years, and I work very closely with our new and existing customers, which is one of many sort of hats that I wear at Deep Crawl, in addition to hosting this series of webinars. Today we are very excited to be joined by Branko Kral, who is the Director of Content and Analytics at Chosen Data. As he mentioned, he's joining us from the beautiful Mammoth Lakes in California. So yeah, we're really excited to have him. He's very passionate about building websites that are kind of beautiful, but also functional, and diving into data and making sure that people are getting the most out of the analytics and kind of communicating that value, which is exactly why we've invited him along to join us today. So welcome, Branko. Really excited to have you join us.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited to be here too.
Great. So before we dive into the actual discussion that we're going to have today, there are a few sort of housekeeping pieces for me to do. So first of all, what we're going to cover. So we're going to talk a little bit about the kind of a little bit of state of nation in terms of where SEO is in the marketplace, and then moving into more how we communicate that value, how we present the data that we have, and how to kind of enable you to get more resources. Some housekeeping on the side of, there's a Q&A box at the very bottom. Please do submit questions throughout. Don't save them up all at the end, otherwise it becomes very stressful for me to manage, and I have to kind of hurriedly work my way through them. So keep those questions coming through throughout, and assuming that we have enough time, we'll get those questions answered. There's also going to be a short survey at the end of the webinar. It will take you less than a minute to complete, and that will help inform us with this series and how we move forward. And also this is being recorded at the moment, and it will be uploaded to YouTube, and will be able to be viewed on demand. So without further ado, let's get into excuse me, I just stopped presenting there accidentally. Let's get into kind of the current state of the nation with SEO. So everyone on this webinar, I assume, kind of understands the value of SEO. It's certainly in a really interesting space at the moment, with lots of changes happening in the world of organic. Google rolling out updates, kindly, one in June and one in July, really keeping everyone on their toes. And really, kind of as we begin to come out of, the global pandemic that we have been in, some countries at different paces, it's really important, obviously, for businesses to regain any losses or capitalize on the benefit in some cases that they've actually had as a result of everyone moving more online. So ensuring that SEO is a key part of your marketing mix is crucial. And obviously, when you look at kind of different channels, I don't want to turn this into a paid versus organic kind of debate, because I think both have kind of merits. But ultimately, what we believe at Deep Crawl is that organic gives you the kind of long-term sustainable traffic and leads that you need in order to ultimately be very successful online. And especially when you get to kind of the laws of diminishing return with paid, SEO or organic is definitely a good channel to look at. So the real challenge, and part of why we wanted to host this webinar and discussion today, is organic search is sometimes a bit of a mystery, particularly to senior leadership. So how do we kind of communicate that value? How do we communicate that value to people that don't maybe understand organic or appreciate it? And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So
I can say a few things to that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I just thought of as you were talking, Dave. I think it doesn't even have to be paid versus organic. I think they work best in combination. We've seen the best results. We get we get the best data when we have both. We can also fill gaps with paid if something is taking a while to rank for, and then we can show up for it right away and then work on the organic rankings over time. That works really, really well. I also think if you do SEO well and you do it long term, it becomes the most predictable channel. And for most websites out there, organic search brings most traffic, which is just huge. So if you don't control that, if you don't work on that consciously, you'll still have traffic. You might just have crappy traffic. So um, it, I think SEO needs to be a part of the mix for every website that's serious about monetizing or bringing results of any sort.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose this is the first part of our conversation here. Really, is how do you communicate that value to your leadership? Because that is, from conversations that I have with our customers, that is definitely a big challenge, because particularly even more so in our space where we're technical SEO, so not even just SEO broadly, just technical SEO, and communicating that value to get people to buy into investing resources, time, effort, and energy in that. So how do we, I suppose, Branko, over to you really, how do you do that? How do you get your leadership to kind of care about it? Why should they invest? What's the potential here? And what is the potential impact of that? And how do we kind of bundle that together to kind of communicate it?
Yeah, I think the first question about what do they care about is where you start, and that's the key. We get excited as SEOs and say at our company, we do a combination of tech and content. We get excited about charts and results about traffic. And then maybe we go a step further and say it's quality traffic. So we get even more excited about that. But really maybe the leadership cares about something else. And sometimes it's sales, sometimes it isn't. But even when the leadership, from my experience, says it is not sales directly, it has to be something that contributes to the bottom line of the company. So if you move over to the next slide, please, Dave. I think you have to have dollar signs in your SEO reporting in some way always, or at least communicate how your SEO impacts the dollar signs. In this report from Google Data Studio, which we use as our default because it connects to the Google platforms really well, and now it's also become really, really advanced in other ways. Now you see top right, there's goal value, which is actually an approximation for the time period, for the last time period. This is for the last month. It's an approximation of the leads that came through. And then if you are to answer the question about why they should invest, you can actually give them that. It's like financial investing. You have your spend, you have your total cost, and then you have your return on that investment or on that ad spend. And it becomes a conversation about numbers and not so much about emotion. And so, if it's a new website, you can always show them examples from other websites. You can show them case studies, benchmarks. There's a lot of good content out there. And it becomes a conversation not so much about why or whether to invest in SEO. It can be much more of a conversation about how much maybe. And then if you get specific, you definitely want to mention what potential it actually has. That also improves the conversation about what the leadership cares about and what they should invest, how much they should maybe invest. And so in these charts, you, for instance, see bookings for a clinic. The dark blue chart, the time series, is about bookings. You see, we've been making some changes. It's also been the pandemic period. The clinic has gone through a lot of changes internally as well, and we can show them how we have been able to follow that. And in the last 5 months here, actually go up steady. We also show at the bottom, the chart that has double bars. We show the comparison to last year. There we recently got 2 months that's historically the highest in traffic. And we also have other charts and other data about how this is much, much better traffic and how it affects conversions positively. So it's not just that we have conversions now, we also have a steady stream, a predictable stream of traffic coming to the website that sets us up for success in the future. So it's the immediate value, and this page specifically reports on the one-time booking value, but it's a clinic, so they have patients who are typically customers who return and have a high lifetime value. And so if you can secure that prospective patients keep coming to the website, learning about stuff, or actually looking at procedures and looking at practitioners, then we know that we'll have a lot of lifetime value that'll keep pouring in. And that's a direct impact on the pipeline and the revenue. For a clinic, it can be a bit more direct than for instance, B2B, but even for a clinic, it's a multi-touch point, several touch point affair. So having that steady stream of quality traffic to the content that we actually want to show is huge and very direct as an impact on the revenue. And then it's a very clear conversation to have.
And a couple of things that you kind of talked about there and touched on are just me thinking, being, I suppose, curious about this, because I'm trying to put myself in maybe some of our audience position where, what if you don't have this data, or you don't have the time afforded to you to kind of see, to kind of get your current benchmark? So how do you, if you, let's assume you're starting from zero, how do you kind of, what would be your advice for kind of communicating why you should be given time to invest? Because SEO is undoubtedly a much longer term play than it is, compared to something like paid, where you can put money in today and see something, see your results in a few days time, let's say. But that's not going to happen with search, right? So how would you kind of go about communicating that in that instance?
So I think there's two different options, or two different scenarios that are distinctly different. One is if you are already working on their tech, SEO, and content and just the website. And then one is if you aren't working on it yet. If you aren't working on it yet, if you're trying to win a client, or if you're trying to start an SEO project in your internal marketing team, you could use industry charts. You can use benchmarks from your industry, even from your competitors. You can use industry reports and case studies. So just data about others. You can also ideally pull up results of your own from your previous projects. If you're an SEO agency like we are, you could pull up charts like this. This is for one clinic. If we're talking to another clinic, we could pull this up and be very specific about what we can expect. But even if it's cross-industry, if you have some charts to show, to speak for you, you become very trustworthy. Now, if you already have the project going, whether it's external agency or internal, I think there's a few things you can do. The first one is that combination of paid and organic. You can get results with paid very quickly, and it really helps. Sometimes clients tell you, yes, we have the long-term focus, or the director, the CFO tells you, yes, we have the long-term focus. Feel free to take your time, because maybe you have explained to them that they'll need to wait for a few months before the results get significant, and then maybe a few more before they get even more significant, and then maybe after the first full year they become best, and then they can keep going and stay predictable. Maybe they actually give you the approval, but we found that people run out of patience more often than not. So if you can bring them results quickly with either a paid campaign that's a part of your SEO effort, or just search effort, I'll say, or if you can bring results quickly by working on the SEO of some quick wins. If you do an audit, maybe with Deep Crawl, you'll find tech issues that you can improve and have quick improvements for in terms of the results and data. Maybe there's content pieces that can use an overhaul. Maybe there's a piece of content that already gets traffic, or maybe you have striking distance keywords that rank at the top of page 2, and you can make, you can use a small amount of budget to have quick gains and gain that confidence in you and yourself from the team or the director from the very beginning. And then I think communication is key, and you also have to stay on track with the budget. So what we did as a mistake recently was that the client asked us to build out their customer support platform as a part of the SEO project. And we said, okay, sounds great. That'll bring a lot of value. And so we promised to do it as a part of the same budget, but then we didn't really have the appropriate budget for the customer support platform. Neither did we have enough budget for the content effort either. So being confident and assertive once you start, and staying on track and dealing with the distractions, because you will have many, many distractions coming your way, is another part of what you can do. And then I would say You don't always need to use a lot of budget for the reporting. Even just Google Search Console and setting up a few conversions in Google Analytics and then setting up 3 pages in Google Data Studio gets you really far. So I don't think it's really an option to not have proper reporting set up. For instance, this chart that you see, or these charts that you see here, we never charged the client for. We just did it because we needed it for ourselves, and we may just as well then show it to the clients too. We did a very simplified version. We didn't do our full analytics setup, but at least we did something that allows us to have these better conversations. So I think you always, once you start the project, you always have to do this if you want to do it well, if you want to enable yourself, if you want to enable better decisions.
Awesome. Yeah. And that actually kind of ties into the next topic really that we hold. The next question really that we have is, okay, so you have the data, and then how do you actually kind of go about presenting that data in a way that leadership kind of instantly sort of get it, or as close to instantly as they possibly can, in order to kind of show or even project that kind of growth.
Mm-hmm. So there's tools out there for you. I know, for instance, DeepCrawl has a connector to some reporting tools, which I find to be super valuable. And then I'll go through the charts that you started showing. We have this page and one more page that I'll use. And so I think a good report has to be simple enough and also complete enough. So for instance, Google Analytics is not what you want in general because it shows you much more than what you need. It's easy to get lost in there. And it's also hard. Sometimes it's pretty hard to get to the charts you actually want. You have to do quite a lot of filtering and other setup in the reports. So we set up Google Data Studio and just show what we want to show. And once a month with every client we have, we go through the reports. And as we go through the report, this is when we set the agenda for the coming month. So the report will be for the previous month and sometimes also the previous 13 months, so we can compare year over year. But we don't just talk about it and get happy about a number or two. We actually use it to set the agenda and the actions for the next month. And in this report, for instance, you see how we focus so much on the dollar signs. So top left, you have the last month, then we compare it to the month before and the month before. Below that, we have charts about inquiries count. And this is really interesting because you might think, well, for an SEO chart, I just want to see it go up, right? And the traffic for this website actually goes up. That'll be on the next slide, that we've been multiplying that. But this business has more business than they can handle. They're in the construction industry. So now they're also hit with the shortages, the pandemic shortages, with all the boats sitting outside of LA. And now you have to bid for materials that you could get really cheaply and easily before. The customers are getting used to that. They cannot always get the exact material they want. So this construction company really wants an improvement to their operation, not just more business. They want the better customers. So what we've been doing is a combination of getting more traffic to the website, but also filtering them out more, discouraging them more, so we only get the right ones. We've increased the minimum project budgets for the customers of this construction company about 3 times now. They used to be 5,000, now they're at, 15,000 minimum project. And so we have more charts for this client as well, of course, where we show the drop-off, and we have a lot of detail on the drop-off steps in the inquiry form interaction. And we really talk about how this impacts the business and the leads that the sales team gets. So not just the numbers that we would be excited about. And the charts show it very clearly. And then we also split the results for organic and everything else. It's mostly an SEO project, but now we do other things too. So we like to report on both, but we like to focus on search, and we do that with these charts. You also see how it's visual, right? Like in the top row, you see the red bars. Those are really easy to compare. And if now the lead value is a little above 600,000, and before 2 months ago it was close to 1 million, then at least I use this to start a conversation with the client about why this is happening. And as long as they feel that we have control over what's going on and we know what we need to do about it, which I'll get to in a minute, they have confidence and we can continue the work that we need to do, and they don't even feel like they need to get all that involved. So if you, sorry, did you
Sorry, Branko.
say
I think
something?
that's really interesting. The very first point that you made was really about keeping it simple, right? And not necessarily. It's very easy as an SEO to jump into hreflangs and canonicals, and get all into very technical stuff. Even something as relatively simple in our world as a H1 tag. The leadership team, the likelihood of them caring about that is minimal to zero, probably. So I think keeping it simple, keeping your language and what you focus your efforts on in things that resonates with them, which, as you say, is usually a dollar, pound, euro, whatever value. I think that's a really kind of key takeaway there, and not to kind of bog yourself down in those kind of intricate details, and just keep it to the stuff that they care about, which kind of obviously these charts do, and it's relatively simple and easy to understand and digest, and then you can use that as a jump off point. And then I think the next part, just kind of summarizing, I suppose, is then context, because as you say, like something going down, we automatically assume is bad, but in the context of this kind of customer, they actually want to improve operationally rather than kind of in terms of the revenue that's necessarily coming in. So that context piece and that specificity to the business is obviously very key as well.
Yeah, that's very, very true. You can't count on the leadership to understand what a canonical tag it would be. But we do actually talk about it. With every deliverable, we walk through quite a bit and we give the context and the theory. But I think that's more to gain even more credibility in their eyes. We also, for instance, send them the articles that we publish on big marketing blogs. Like, whenever we publish something, many times it's a case study or a how-to or an analysis walkthrough. I'm definitely going to be sending out the recording of this webinar to our clients. We do use this and we do talk about it, but we don't really count on the clients or the leadership remembering. It's more to show them that we know what we're doing. And if you move on to the next page, these charts are just super clear, right? The top one showing the massive growth, that makes everybody happy. If I just show this chart, if I start the meeting with this chart, or if I show a chart like this in every meeting every month, they're going to be so happy that they're going to listen close and they're going to be excited to take the action because now they see the results. And again, if the project is just starting, I can show this chart as a part of a meeting about a different project to set the expectations about what can happen if you're doing it well. And then before after is awesome. So at the bottom, you see page speed insights for a website that was built really slow. Then we took over, and instead of working on the content as we had promised, we changed the plan, got the approval for that, and we actually reworked the whole backend, and we got massive speed improvements. And you could actually feel that it wasn't just 10 points where maybe Google notices, but you can actually feel the website behaving different. So before and after is also huge. And you can do the same for one piece of content. You can do a traffic chart for just one piece of content and then the conversions from it too, and then do the before and after. So I think lastly, as it is common in the analytics community, you want to use the best practice of how you analyze and present. And I like the structure of starting with what's going on, then analyzing why it is going on, then suggesting what you want to do about it, and then ending on what results you expect from that action. And that closes the circle and sets the action items. That way, your team sees that you didn't just make something up because it sounds good. And you'll show that SEO doesn't stand for snake essential oil. You'll show them that they have a lot of thought and plan behind what you want to do, and it's justified, and they can just sit back and enjoy watching, maybe give you input when you need it, when you need their industry expertise. But that analysis best practice is super important to me. So what's going on, why it's going on, what do you want to do about it, and what do you expect of that action? And that's how I would end this part.
Sure. So you would effectively, with this top chart, if we're in the room with the C-suite or leadership or senior stakeholders, you would start with a chart like this effectively, and then dive in, rather than the other way around of like, here's all the stuff that we've done and this is the result. You start with the result and then kind of peel the layers back from there.
Yeah, because when you start with the results and you get into more charts, which again for the time series in red, the red is the brand color. This is exactly the tone of the color. That's why it's red. It's not like something bad's going on, as you can see. But we have more charts too, and the content that we have worked on that's working well will show in the charts. It'll stand out. It'll show growth. It'll show an impact on conversions. It'll show something great. And so that's the best way to get to talking about what we've done, right? Why would I care about what we've done if it's not doing much yet? But if there's a chart with growing traffic or conversions or both behind, let's say, the piece of content that we have overhauled or published a new one, then they will definitely care, and that's a different conversation.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. And that kind of leads into a little bit of our next topic, which is, how do we get more resources? Because if you're doing all of this wonderful work as an SEO, traffic's going up and conversion rates are, even if conversion rates stay the same, but because you've increased more traffic, we're generating more revenue, which is all kind of positive stuff, making the assumption that that's what you're trying to do. How do you, sometimes, let me start that again. Sometimes SEOs can feel siloed or in their own little world, and they're not able to actually get more resources. And SEOs are very resourceful and are used to doing wonderful things with limited resources, but sometimes you need to have more resources. So how do you actually go about, getting perhaps more resources, approved and provided to you by kind of leadership teams?
Yeah. So I think if you're in a silo, it's your own fault. If you're in a silo, it's up to you to change that. You can't really expect to be invited everywhere. You have to invite yourself. If you come to a party and nobody's talking to you, then maybe, I don't know, you came to the wrong party or you're not doing much there, right? You wouldn't blame the other people at the party for you being by yourself at the table. You have to try and get engaged and get access to all kinds of everything. You then also want to help everyone. You want to make it a one-way street where you think SEO is so important that everybody should be supporting you, and if they don't, you start complaining. You want to be the one to support others with the right content, with the right development improvements on the website, with the right analyses. The part about analytics and reporting is also huge. We set it up also because if we have the data about what's going on, then we can support everybody else, and we know the most. And it's funny when you see marketing agencies hired, in their reporting they usually focus on just what they do, which is definitely important for, let's say, if you do paid Facebook, it's important to definitely focus on paid social first. But if you don't analyze the context of it, then you're missing too much. So we actually do paid deliverables in each SEO project, where in the beginning we do strategy and some other structural setup and improvements. And the analytics setup is a part of that. And it's focused on search analytics, but it covers everything else too. It's a Google Suite setup. So super versatile and useful to everyone, even if the company has Amplitude, or they have their CRM in Salesforce, they will still benefit from having a solid Google Analytics setup with Google Tag Manager and Google Data Studio and maybe Google Optimize. So we actually put ourselves in that position of being helpful and important because we have set up the data, and we always consider the full context when we make decisions. And then we also, in our meetings and communication, we are very proactive about talking to the rest of the team. For instance, the team that manages the social, or that manages marketing automation and CRM, or the team that manages emails, and definitely the salespeople. You have to make the salespeople like you, because they're often the ones, especially in B2B, they'll be the ones who take over the leads from you. or maybe it's the front desk person, whoever it is, right? Or whoever is the biggest expert on the topic. If it's for a clinic or a construction company, then it'll be the doctor or the head of the crew who knows a lot about the construction, or maybe it's the designer who makes the CAD drawings about what's going to be made. That person could give you the perfect angles on what's been constructed, and then you can also get a photo from the same angle, do before after. So being helpful, being a resource, being proactive also sounds like common sense, but there are very specific ways about doing that. And another one of them would, for instance, be education. Always taking some time to discuss the best practice and why you're doing certain things will come back to you as a big benefit.
Definitely. I actually, one of our, well, not a recent customer, actually a customer that we've worked with for the last couple of years, when we first started our engagement with them, we had a 3-year plan, and they wanted to bring DeepCon on board. And the first part of the first year was just purely education. They weren't necessarily stressing about traffic and how much revenue they're generating from organic. It was purely an education piece across the business, across different business units. And we were a part of that journey from the kind of very beginning. And we're now into that third year, but that was exactly what they recognized as like the biggest bottleneck and barrier to actually getting changes made and done, was that education piece. So I think that is often overlooked, and there is a tendency to say, well, I'm in charge of organic and I'm going to take this on for myself and I know what I'm doing. But actually there's lots of things that you can do that, things that you do over here can impact the entire business, and also vice versa. So it's a two-way street, and building those relationships and educating different departments, team members is definitely very, very important.
Yeah, relationships. And if you move over to the next slide too, that shows how reporting can be part of the education. Many times people just can't imagine what organic search can bring. And if you put it into context, they start responding differently. So for instance, here, this is a channel context analysis that we've published on Moz. I could actually share a link to the Google Data Studio file for people to copy. I'll pull it up in a minute. But here, this company at the time of making this analysis was already very active on paid social, and they also had their email flows built out really well. And so in terms of conversion rates or per session e-commerce value, so per session average sale, the email flows were just the best, even though there's low traffic, but that is a super qualified, warmed up audience. And then their paid Facebook is also doing pretty well relatively to others in the industry and industry benchmarks. But their organic search, thanks to their consistent long-term content efforts, the organic search traffic and its results were always just so massive that sometimes even just direct response organic search would put a shadow on everything else. And this is not to say they should stop doing their automated email flows. This is where their incremental growth can come from. But this was to justify the continuation of the content effort. We were not even actually doing this for them. We just did the analytics part and made some objective recommendations. And so when they saw this in the context, they already knew that organic search does a lot for them. They knew they had a lot of traffic from it, but also putting it in the context of revenue and per session performance gave all the clarity and all the additional education that they needed about their own website and how the different channels can have synergy together.
Yeah, awesome. I think that context piece is really important. And like you say, sometimes leadership understand that, organic is our biggest channel, but they don't realize how big that is as a channel. And if that were to go away tomorrow, what kind of impact that would actually have on the business. So framing it like this, and having that kind of looking at it through this kind of lens is definitely very, very, very powerful. Awesome. I think that's pretty much it from our kind of conversation side of things. I think we've got some time for some Q&A. So we've had a few questions kind of trickling in throughout. So thanks to everyone that's asked a question. So one question we actually have from James here is, how do you ensure you actually have the accurate numbers to report and the impact that the changes that you've made have on revenue? So basically, how can you ensure accuracy with the data that you're presenting and make sure that it's trustworthy, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. So, well, testing and a proper setup with Google Tag Manager, and then Google Analytics and Google Data Studio mostly for the reporting part of it. But actually testing your data after you set them up in Google Tag Manager. We also want to convey to who we work with that there will be errors in the numbers, and sometimes that's okay. You know, there's an error margin always. We just try and get it as accurate as we can. We try and go set up Google Analytics filters. We set up different custom events with Google Tag Manager, but we still have some inaccuracy, and we then convey that it's there. Even if you compare it to Google Search Console, there will be some inaccuracy. But as long as we can explain that it's there, and as long as we can show that we know about it and we're dealing with it, it's fine. And then what you really want is to have a consistent setup. So we like to put a lot of effort into the analytics setup in the beginning, in the first few months. So in the first few weeks, we're just starting it from scratch usually, or we're redoing it completely from how it was before. And then we watch the data and we watch different errors. We look for things very intensively for a couple months so that we can tweak it as much as we can in the first few months. And then we try and not make major changes, because what we really need for a good analysis is that we can compare it month to month, or channel to channel, landing page to landing page, or subdomain to subdomain. And if you make too many changes in the tracking setup, then that gets hard. So even if there's an error margin, as long as it's the same error margin, you can actually get really good analysis through comparison. So yeah, do your setup as well as you can, and then try and not make major changes to it unless you really have to.
Cool, makes sense. We also had a question from Maddie about kind of budget and pricing. So how do you kind of pitch and price the budget for kind of dedicated analytics? How do you kind of go about that? How do you approach it? How do you get that, I suppose, signed off really?
Mm-hmm. So we try and not even ask that much if we're allowed to do it. We put it into that strategy sprint, and I used to put it as a separate item, but now we just say the strategy will bring you this. It'll bring the keyword research, the content pillars. There will be a tech audit. There will be an action plan for 3 to 6 months with a lot of detail for the first few months, and then you'll also get search analytics set up. And it'll be great, and it'll have reporting in it. It'll have Google Tag Manager, so we can have better tracking, not just for search, but for all of your channels, all of your advertising, for instance. And then we give one big ticket item for all of the strategy sprint that has analytics set up in it. And then for every month, we also do a little bit for analysis and for updating the reporting. You have to allow yourself, you have to enable yourself to keep the reporting and the tracking fresh. We make more changes to reporting monthly than we do to tracking. And if it's tracking, it's more so additions than changes. So I think a part of it is show the decision maker that it has to be there, that it's a matter of course to invest in analytics if you want to do your marketing well, and don't even pitch a project without analytics. When we do options, let's say we do 2 or 3 options for pricing, we make the more expensive one with more content or more backlinks, but we never make a cheaper version that'll be cheaper because it doesn't have analytics in it. In all the pricing options, we'll put analytics and not even make it a question whether it should be there or not.
That makes sense. That's a great tip. We've also had a question from Edon. how do you estimate the collections in dollars? What data do you use? And I think this is a double-pronged question, or actually it's a follow-up, I suppose, to this. And do you differentiate between branded and non-branded? So, what data points are you using for kind of projections? And are you splitting things out between branded search terms and non-branded search terms?
So I'll start there. I'll start with the last one. We do split between branded and non-branded, but more so to know about it, you can't always take so much action based on that. And also, if your biggest channel is SEO, which, like I said, is the case, or at least organic search is the biggest traffic source for most websites out there. Organic search brings most traffic for most websites out there. And when that's the case, a lot of your branded searches will be a result of your other organic search performance. But then we also, this is now a part of the communication and not being in a silo, not thinking it's okay to work in a silo. We look closely at what the rest of the team's doing. I'll keep going back to the example of social. People often decide between paid search and organic search, but people also often decide between social and search. And so most of the projects we work on will have a team working on social. Sometimes it's even one of our people helping distribute the content on social. And when there's more activity on social, there may be more branded searches. But again, we may just give kudos to the social team and we don't have so much ability to do something about it. And also, if you want to work on content specifically, you are looking for the searches that led to your content coming up, not so much all kinds of searches and branded searches. So that's that part, branded versus non-branded and how to use it. Now, how do we estimate the collections in dollars, pounds, euros? What data do we use exactly? So this has to be very specific to every project. And I have an article about estimating the value of conversions for websites that have offline conversions. It's called the new recipe for goal value settings in Google Analytics. We have that published on Orbit Media, and there's a bunch of other good content out there on this too. And so we sometimes just use estimation. So for instance, the charts that we were showing about the clinic are an estimation. We know when people get to a certain step on the booking platform, when they want to book an appointment. And with that particular clinic, we had some limitations on the booking platform and we couldn't track the booking all the way to the booking confirmation. But we were measuring the step of getting really far in the booking platform, very close to booking, for a few months. And then we were in communication with the clinic and they were telling us how many bookings they actually got. And then from there, we made an estimate of the booking step that we could measure and how valuable it is based on actual numbers from the front desk. For the construction company, they have a multi-step inquiry form that people have to go through if they want to work with the company. And then we estimated that about half of the leads that come through that form will turn into actual customers. We also make the leads designate the budget that they want. And so that's actually a pretty conservative estimate because most people give you a lower budget than they end up working with. So that would be that. A much easier example is e-commerce, right? If you're selling stuff on the website, you take e-commerce value. That's why e-commerce will be a good type of customer for any marketer. You can get to the dollar signs very directly. For everybody else, we put a lot of effort into figuring out what the value of the leads should actually be.
Makes sense. Yeah. E-commerce is nice and simple, right? It's
it's straightforward.
And then there we go. So I think we have time for one more question. We've had some great questions come in. Brian actually has asked, do you have a suggestion on getting started in Google Data Studio? Is there a web resource that offers simple steps for how to build and test Data Studio reports using data from Google Search Console? So DeepCore actually has a Data Studio connector, and we have some templates that are freely available. So If you use Deep Crawl and you have access to the Data Studio connector, then that's a good place to start with some of those templates. And obviously you can build kind of custom ones, and there's lots of resources on our website. But Branko, don't know if you have any recommended sources or places people can go to kind of get some nice how-tos and step-by-step guides.
Yeah, Google Data Studio actually has template gallery as well. You can actually look that up, Google Data Studio template gallery or report gallery. You can copy those and start there. And there's more and more. Supermetrics has a connector for Google Search Console that's better than Google's own native connector for Google Search Console. And Supermetrics also has some really good templates. We have collaborated with them a bunch, and some of our best content is on their website, and we've used their connectors for different things. They have a connector for just about any marketing data source that you could imagine. So you can start there too. So definitely the templates, whether that's from Deep Crawl, Google Data Studio, Supermetrics, and then Google Analytics Academy. Actually, they have some good chapters on Google Data Studio. And then there's also a newsletter about what's new in Google Data Studio. So once you start digging in and searching for things, you'll find them. And you can just keep it simple. You know, Google Data Studio now has a lot of different features, a lot more than when they started a few years ago. But you don't have to use that much. The reports we showed today use some custom stuff, but you also want to make it pretty standard, and you want to make it look familiar so that people aren't scared by it, right? You want to make it into a chart that people are used to reading, and a chart that's simple enough to where it's easy to read. So another thing you can remember is that even if you make a simple Google Data Studio report, even if it's just one page, you may be doing a better job than the rest of the marketing team. You may be able to stand out just by making a simple one-pager in Google Data Studio. So start there, and then you'll probably learn to like it a lot. If you have a team, you'll want to designate a person to, we have an analytics expert on our team for the code, the development side of things. He's in Google Tag Manager a lot, and he makes custom code. He's a whiz. He's actually in London. Shout out to David. But then we also have one person who does just reporting for us. And she knows Google Analytics really well. She knows how Google Tag Manager works, but she doesn't go there that much. She focuses on just reporting for us and does it really well. So that's the next level. And there's a lot of really good resources if you then eventually get advanced. Tableau, for instance, has really good resources. Leah Pika, a good friend of mine and a very, very good data presenter, she has awesome resources. She has the before and after, like the overhaul comparison of charts. Those are really good. If you look up any analytics and data visualization expert showing how they redid a chart, you'll learn the visualization concepts really quickly.
Awesome. Some great tips in there. And maybe what we can do is we can send out some links to some resources as part of the email follow-up. So yeah. We're actually running out of time. So I'm going to wrap up there. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Branko, for sharing your expertise, insights, and some of the visualizations that you put together. I think it's a really interesting session. Obviously, everyone on this call watching the recording, feel free to reach out if you want to learn anything more about Branko, what he's doing, Deep Crawl, what we're doing, and also there's lots of ebooks and resources available on our website, from core web vitals to how to build, manage, and lead world-class SEO teams. Also, a quick heads up for our next webinar, which is on the 28th of July, which is on a similar sort of theme, data visualization in SEO, why it's important and how to use it to prove SEO's value. So definitely keep an eye out for that coming out in newsletters and emails. And also don't forget the survey at the end of this this webinar. Really, really helpful for us to decide what we're going to do next, feedback, where we can improve, where we can do things better, and the kind of content that you want to see from us moving forward. So Branko, thanks again. Thanks again for having me joined. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.